All right, hello everyone. Welcome back. We had a nice vacation.
Hello.
Today we are going to go through some ideas has to do with Jewish legal philosophy that have to do with the parasha. Well, the last parasha, the previous one, it'll lead into it, and Parashat Shoftim, right? That we will read this Shabbat. Okay. So let's start with Pirashat Re'eh, the Pirasha that we just read. All right, it says Re'eh Anochi noten lifnech yom beracha uklala. It says, behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. The translation here I don't like too well. It says Et beracha asher tishmeu, the blessing, if you shall hearken unto the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you this day, and the curse, v'hakelanayim lo tishmeu and mizvot Adonai Elohechem, and the curse, if you shall not hearken unto the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside out of the way which I commanded you this day. Now, the Hebrew doesn't say im, it's im tishmeu, right? The Kerala says im lo tishmeu, if you do not listen. The beracha doesn't say im tishmeu, it says asher tishmeu, that you shall listen. So proper translation of this verse should be the blessing that you shall listen or hearken unto the commandments of the Lord your God. I think recently in one of our more recent classes, I brought this point. I wanted to talk this point in there, but we're going to understand it from a slightly different perspective today. So, what is it saying? I mean, we're used to all previously, except for a previous Perashah Ekev, previously, we're always accustomed to, if you listen to the mitzvot, then you'll get all these blessings. And if you don't listen to the mitzvot, then you'll get all these curses, all these bad things will come. But over here, it doesn't say that. It says, the blessing that you shall listen to the mitzvot, the curse if you don't listen. Only the curse is conditioned to listening. The blessing isn't conditioned. It says the blessing is that you shall listen to the mitzvot. All right? Anyone have any ideas or remember from one of the previous classes where I mentioned this? Can anyone explain this pasuk? Any volunteers? Okay, so we're used to always, if you listen, this and this will happen. If you don't, this and this will happen. Now, in the previous parasha, before I explain this last week's parasha, but the week before, it says Ekem, it says V'haya Ekem tishmeun et mishpatim ha'ele, right? And it shall come to pass, because you hearken to these ordinances and keep and do them, that the Lord God shall keep with you the covenant, right? And then all the beracha, ve'ahevecha, and he loves you and blesses you, right? So in Ekev, he's saying, it shall come to pass because you do this. Now he's talking about causality, right? Up until now, we were always conditioned to reward and punishment. If you do this, I'll give you this. If you don't, then I'll give you this, right? And last week's parasha, it says, it shall come to pass because it's causality. The beracha is the natural result of keeping the Torah, and not to think of it anymore as reward for keeping the Torah. But if you want blessing, this is the prescribed way to behave. This is what you need to do. And this will bring blessing into your life. Okay? And now we come to last previous one, Re'eh, where it doesn't say it's the natural effect of keeping the mitzvot. The beracha that you listen to the mitzvot. says the mitzvot themselves are the beracha. Don't ask for reward for keeping the mitzvot. The greatest reward you can get are the mitzvot. And that's when the Hachamim say, Sechar mitzvah, mitzvah, the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah, which many people interpret as the reward for doing a mitzvah is that you get to do another mitzvah. What the Hachamim are telling you, the reward for doing a mitzvah is the mitzvah that you did. For instance, what's the reward and the beracha, the blessing that comes from keeping Shabbat? Well, is there any greater blessing than Shabbat? You have a hard day, week of working, and then you get this one day where you have to rest, and that the whole economy comes to a standstill so that you get to rest and you're not losing out on your business because everyone has to be closed on that day. Is there any greater blessing than that? So Moshe Rabbeinu is bringing us through this evolution. First, he's telling us, do the mitzvot. We're going to reward you. God's going to reward you. And then, at the end of the 40 years, we get to Parashat Ekev, and he says, if you want blessing, you're about to enter the land of Israel, you want to have a prosperous nation, then this is the prescription, right? Do the mitzvot, and the natural result of doing the mitzvot is going to be that you're going to have a prosperous nation. Now, I'm an economist, and the truth is, the formula to having a prosperity in the land, it's already been cracked. Listen to any course on the economics of a nation. It's prescribed. We already know what are the conditions that there need to be in order for a poor country to turn into a prosperous one, right? What does it start with? Well, the first thing that it needs a justice system. It needs a judicial functioning system where people can make contracts with each other. And if they come to court, the court can enforce those agreements. Another thing that a country needs is what we have in Israel, it's called a Rasham HaMashkonot, a place where they document liens on assets. So if someone wants to receive credit, wants to take a loan in order to invest in real estate, invest in infrastructure, there needs to be a place where we can register the assets that the investments are taken against. All right. Every nation that has these things welcomes money and investments from wealthy nations. Without that, well, there's too much risk. What happens is money flows into the country. The elites of the country who are corrupt because there's no judicial system, they become millionaires and billionaires, and the infrastructure of the nation stays in total devastation. The people remain poor, right? The country remains poor. The only ones who get rich are those on top. So, Ekev is telling us, well, if you want prosperity in your land, what you need is to set up this judicial system. You need to have a nation that's based on law, and so that when people have disputes, they can come to the court and they know how the court is going to decide. Re'eh is taking us a step further. It says the greatest blessing for a nation is what Moshe Rabbeinu did. It's called the judicial reform of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu He says here, Vaya, ki yaviacha Adonai elecha el haaretz, and it shall come to pass when the Lord your God shall bring you into the land, right, that you shall set the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse upon Mount Ebal, right? If I'm not mistaken, in one of your trips, you actually went and saw Har Gerizim and Har Ebal, right, where Shechem is built right there. Halohem Yarden, right? They are beyond the Jordan, behind the way of the going down of the sun, all right, in the land of the Canaanites, right? Mun had Gilgal, Etzel Elon, right? You went to Elon More, right, Bracha? Am I correct? And so from Elon More, you have a perfect view of the two mountains, Har Gerizim and Har Eval. Now, what happened over there? Part of the terms of the covenant in Sinai, we're talking about the second year, or actually we're talking about even the first month or 50 days after the Exodus from Egypt, right? There was Ma'aman Har Sinai. We contracted a covenant with God, and he said that we're going to ratify the covenants. Since the covenant is for the land of Israel. When you enter the land of Israel, you're going to go to this place, and this uh, uh, this event where you're going to have half the people on Har Gerizim, half on Har Eval. Over there at the foot of the mountains, you're going to erect these huge boulders and engrave the law on it. All right? This is the judicial reform of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's no longer a law that is held by the elite. The purpose of that is to establish a free society. A free society means freedom under the law, means every single citizen has equal access to the law. Everyone can be informed what the law is. Everyone can study it. Anyone could know it. And this way, there's no surprises when you come to court. Because in a tyrannical society, only the elites know the law. And you have no idea what's going to happen if your case is brought to court. All right? It's completely up to the discretion of the judge. Moshe Rabbeinu's vision here is a nation where everybody is aware of the law and how to behave. And if anyone has a question, they come to this place where the covenant was ratified and they can read for themselves what the law says. So when he says, behold, I said before, the fact you shall hearken, or that you listen to the mitzvot, the greatest blessing for a nation is to be a free society. And that means that you have the right to be an informed citizen. You can learn the law, and you're not dependent on anybody to teach you the law. Because the Torah, the halachot that we're meant to know, isn't meant to be complex and sophisticated. It's meant to be actually very, very simple. All right, now look at what the Rambam says. Actually, this chapter, I don't have the translation for what I wanted to read to you here. This is at the end of the fourth chapter in the first book of Maimonides' legal code. It's 1,000 book detailing all the laws of the Torah. Right, so the first 4 chapters, he's going a little bit into philosophy, into what some people will call mysticism or Kabbalah, goes into Ma'aseh Merkava and Ma'aseh Bereshit, what we call the Pardes, right? He says, Vani Omer, she'en ra'ui litayel b'pardes, right? A person should not venture in the Pardes, ela mi shenitmala keresolechem u'parsar. You want to go for a walk in the Pardes, first you need to satisfy, right? He says, your stomach with bread and meat, right? Allegorically. What does that mean? Lechem basar. What is this lechem basar? Ulida bi'ur ha'asur ve'hamutar v'chayosef b'hen mish'ar ha'misvot. It says, what is this lechem ubasar, this meat and bread, is to know what is mutar, what you're allowed to do, what you're forbidden from doing, what are your obligations, what are your rights, וכיוצא בהן משאר כל המצוות, and so on from all the מצוות. ואף על פי שדברים אלו, דבר קטן כאותם חכמים, says even though knowing asur and mutar is something that the Hachamim refer to as a minor. שהרי אמרו חכמים דבר גדול עשה מרכבה, right? The Hachamim say what is a great matter is the mysticism, the philosophy, right? He says ודבר קטן הוויה דאביי ורבא, and what is a minor matter is discussions between Abaye and the Rava, two Talmudic scholars. ואף על פי כן, even so, that the Hachamim refer to learning halacha and knowing what is permissible and what is forbidden as a minor matter. אף על פי כן, ראויין הן להקדימן. You should learn this first. Why? שהן מיישבים דעתו של אדם תחילה, because they settle a man's mind before venturing into esoterics. First, you need to be grounded in reality. Halacha grounds you in reality. But this is his point. Ve'od, and furthermore, shehen hatova hagedula sheishpia HaKadosh Baruch Hu leishuv ha'olam hazeh. This is the great benefit, the great blessing that God bestowed onto us to settle this world, right? This is the beracha. He says, "Re'eh natati lifnechem hayom beracha u'klara." Et beracha, the blessing that you shall listen to the mitzvot, or that you shall learn the mitzvot. He says, everyone needs to be well grounded in halacha, and everyone has equal access to it. And this is the greatest blessing HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave mankind, a set of rules and a legal system that lets you know how to behave, and that everybody within your society is liable to that same system. Everyone knows the rules of the game. Ve'efshar sheyidaem hakol, and everybody can know them. Gadol ve'katan, whether they are great rabbis or just a simple citizen like you and me. Ish ve'isha, a man or a woman. Ba'alev rahav u'ba'alev kasar, whether he has a great understanding, great intellectual capacity, or someone who isn't too advanced intellectually. He says everybody in the society has equal access to understanding the laws and the halachot, and knowing what you can do, what you shouldn't do, what are your rights, and what are your obligations. V'zot ha-beracha, right? Et ha-beracha asher tishme'u. The beracha is that you listen to the mitzvot, that you learn the mitzvot. Anybody can learn the mitzvot. And this is the reform of Moshe Rabbeinu. And I want to move on to the reform, not of Moshe Rabbeinu, but of Rabbeinu Moshe, right? Moshe, our teacher, Moshe ben Maimon, the Rambam, Maimonides. And here, in his introduction to his legal code, right? I'm going to read, I don't have the English version online. I have it in a book. No, you can't see it. All right. It says, and at the present time, when severe disasters keep following one another, and the needs of the moment brush aside all things, right? He's talking about when we're in times of exile, and we're being persecuted, going from one country to another. Our wise men lose their wits, and the understanding of our clever people is hidden. People don't have the time to sit down and study as they did previously. Hence, the commentaries the codes of law and the responsa, which were written by the Geonim, regarded them as easily intelligible, right? We had the Talmud, and there was always questions and letters going to the heads of the Talmudic academies, and they were responding. And what they, as easy to understand, have presented difficulties in our days, so that a mere few are capable of understanding the subject matter properly. Right? So now you have to be very wise in order to study the Talmud, understand what it wants from you, understand what the head of the Academy of the Talmud explained about it. Right? Needless to say, this applies particularly to the Talmud itself, the Babylonian as well as the Palestinian, the Sifra, the Sifre, and the Tosefta, all the literature that went into composing the Talmud, works that require wide knowledge, a learned mind, and ample time, which doesn't really exist so much anymore. He said his times. I bestirred myself, therefore, I, Moses ben Maimon, the Sephardi, and relied upon the Creator as be He, and made a thorough study of all these books and decided to put down in writing the results obtained from all these works as to what is prohibited and permitted, unclean or clean, right? Tamen, tahor, and the other laws of the Torah, all in plain language and concisely, so that the entire oral Torah might become familiar to all systematically, without arguments and counter arguments. You ever study a passage in the Talmud? He says this, and then he rejects, right, his claim and brings counter logic. Until you understand what the bottom line of each discussion is, it's a very tedious job that requires a lot of time, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of wisdom. So he says, I'm going to do all that for you. All right? And I'm going to make a book of the bottom line, only of the bottom line. What was the result of all these discussions? Why? So that anybody can come, read the book, and just know what the law is. So that all the laws be open to old and young alike, whether they belong to the precepts of the written Torah or the enactments and the ordinances introduced by the sages and the prophets. So you could know, what did the Torah require of us, what came at a later generation, and these are, right, if what Rambam did is, after a certain exile, when there became so much confusion in the Torah, and this reform that Moshe Rabbeinu did was kind of losing its purpose and its touch, he come and re-reformed the Torah to make it accessible again to everybody. All right, so what is the greatest beracha of a nation? Is to live in a free society and be an informed citizen, so that, and in a way that everyone has equal access to the Torah. So we go back to the so what is, look at what he says here, right? Right? Beracha sher tishmeu, that you listen to the commandments, right? Ushmartem la'asot, right? And you shall observe, right, all the statutes and ordinances which I set before you this day. It says, all right. So this is the first section, right? We deal with one of the most fundamental concepts in law, is that, first of all, everybody needs to be informed of the law. And that is the precondition to living in a free society. When Hachamim say, En lecha ben horim, en la misha osek b'Torah, right? The only person who is truly free is someone who studies Torah. This is, why is that? It's just because your freedom is a function of your knowledge of the law, and that's entirely up to you. You get to decide how much you're going to study and how well you're going to master halacha and master the law. So, enecha ben chorin ela mi she'osek b'Torah, right? And this is the beracha that God is giving us. And now we move on to Perashat Shofetim, right? We want to be a free society. In modern days, we would consider it, we would call it a democratic country. It says, "V'chi tavo el haaretz, asher Adonai Elohecha noten lecha," right? And you shall come unto the land which the Lord your God gives you, and shall possess it, and shall dwell there, right? Shall say, I will set a king over me, like all the nations that are round about me. It says, Asima alai melech, I want to appoint a king upon me, a king. What we know from all societies around the world, right? Kings are usually dictators. This isn't a symbol of a free society, right? But I want to be like all the nations and set a king upon me. Is this good? Is this positive? Should we set a king upon ourselves? What do you say? It says, Som tasim alecha melech. So you shall in any ways set a king over you. We have a mitzvah. One of our 613 mitzvot is to appoint a king. How does that fit in with being equal under the law? How does that fit in with being a citizen of a free society? That God should, right? You have to someone that God chooses, one from among your brethren, to be someone from our nation. You should set a king upon yourself. Lo tuchal latet alecha ish nochri. He says this, that you shouldn't, abuse his power and multiply horses and take many, many wives. And right, lo yarbe lo nashim. However, and it shall be when he sits upon the throne of the kingdom, v'katav lo Mishneh Torah hazot, right? He shall write a copy of this law in a book, right? Milifnei hakohanim haneviim v'hayeta imo, and it shall be with him. He shall carry this book of the law with him everywhere he goes, and every free moment that he has, and he shall read there in all the days of his life. Right? Yishmor et kol divrei Torah hazot v'chokim ha'ele la'asotam, right? That he shall live according to these laws and always comply with them. Okay, so on the one hand, it seems that maybe appointing a king isn't such a great idea. On the other hand, we have a mitzvah, right? One of these mitzvot, that is the beracha, right? Part of this prescription of how to have a prosperous, free society is to appoint a king. So, is it positive or negative? I would think it's positive if it's part of the prescription. No, we're in Eretz Israel, right? There's a long period of the shoftim, the judges, and then at the end of this period of the judges, right? One of the last judges is Shemuel, Samuel the prophet, right? And the people come to him and ask him to appoint a king. Look what it says here. And it came when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. By the way, the sons of Shemuel were not Shemuel. The sons of Shemuel were very, very corrupt and very abusive of their power. And the people despised the sons of Shemuel. Vayishem beno ha-bechor, and the name of his firstborn was Yoel, and the name of his second was Abiyah, right? Shofetim be'Be'er Sheva, and they were judging in the city of Be'er Sheva, and his sons walked not his ways. Velo halchu banav bidrachav. They didn't follow his path. Vayatu acharei habasa. right? They turned aside from, and they took bribes and perverted justice. Vayatu mishpat. So they would disturb of whoever paid them the most. ויתקבצו כל זקני ישראל ויבואו אל שמואל הרמתה. So now all the elders of the nation, they come to Shemuel, and they ask Shemuel to his house, and they say to him, look, your sons are corrupt. We don't like him. We can't be judged by them. Right? שימה לנו מלך לשופטנו ככל גבוהים. Says, make us a king to judge us like all the nations. So they're asking for something positive. I mean, can anyone blame the elders of Israel for wanting Shmuel to appoint a king? First of all, Shmuel's sons are corrupt. They're abusing their power. They're taking bribes. Second of all, or maybe this should be the first point, there's a mitzvah in the Torah to appoint a king. Right? So this, you would think, is a very positive thing. Vayera hadavar be'enei Shemuel. Right? This was displeasing to Shmuel. He wasn't happy when they said, give us a king to judge us. Right? It says, Sima lanu, right? What they asked, Sima lanu melech shoftenu kechol hagoyim. Appoint a king upon us to judge us. And Shmuel, he says, by the way, what does he say here? Tina lanu melech leshoftenu. What was he upset about? It says, give us a king to judge us. It says, Vayomer Adonai el Shemuel. And God was Shemuel. Shema, listen to the people. Grant them the request in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not be king over them. It says, Lo techa ma'asu, ki oti ma'asu mimochem. So first God say, listen to them, right? They're asking for a king. Listen to them. I would expect them to say, listen to them, because there's a mitzvah. They want to do the mitzvah. In the Torah, it says. But what's he saying? He says, it's not you that they're mad at, that they want a king. It's me that they're mad at. God's saying, they reject me as their king, and they want to appoint a manly king, and so listen to them. At first, I could say, okay, Shemuel gets upset. Why? Maybe he takes it personally. It's his sons that they're rejecting. And God is saying, no, it's not their sons, and it's not even you. It's me that they're rejecting. Right? According to all the works which they have done since the day that I brought them out of Egypt, right? They're ungrateful, they're always complaining, they're always reverting back to paganism, right? Upon this day that they have forsaken me and served other gods, so do they also unto thee. So they do so to me. So listen to their request, right? I said, just tell them what this means, right? Inform them what it means to have a king upon them. All right, then he goes in, he's gonna take your sons and to fight in his wars. He's gonna take your daughters to be his servants and to be his bakers, right? And you think he's gonna go out to fight your wars? No. He's gonna take your sons to fight his wars. It's not that he's gonna go out to fight your wars for you. It says when another king insults him and he decides that he needs to take revenge, he's gonna now raise an army of all of your sons in order to teach that king a lesson for maybe looking at him the wrong way. And by the way, this is how many wars throughout history have started. Something personal between two kings, right, needing to take revenge against each other and dragging an entire nation and sometimes even an entire world into a world war just because, right, one king looked at the other in a way that he didn't find respectful. How does any of this fit in with being a free society? And what is Shemuel's rebuke of the people? Because we have a mitzvah to appoint a king. Not only that, but look what it says, right? He says, right? Appoint a judge to appoint a king to judge us, like all of the nations. Most people, by the way, most commentators, they say, wait, why was Shemuel so upset and why was God so upset? Is because of this part over here, Kol Haguim, like all the nations. He says, well, ask for a king like all the nations. Well, that should be a problem, but Shemuel doesn't even mention that in his rebuke. And if we look at the mitzvah over here, right, it says, Ki tavoy la'aretz, and you should say, Asima alay melech kechol hagoyim, I shall appoint a king over me like all the nations. So what's the problem? Any ideas? So you have to be careful in what it says. You have to read carefully what it says over here. What is Shemuel? What did the people ask? And what is Shemuel's rebuke? Look. Behold, you are old, right? You son, now make a king to judge us like all the nations. Right? And Shmuel didn't like that. And he said, give us a king to judge us. And then God says, it's not you that they reject, it's me that they reject. Why is he saying that? Any ideas, anybody?
I think, I'm not sure, the way I perceive it or I see it is because they wanted to be judged by a man and not by Hashem. The king is not, at this point, I would say it's, they wanted to be like the nations. They didn't want to be like separated for
You
Hashem.
started off good, but realize in Shmuel's rebuke of the people, he doesn't mention that whole thing of like all the nations. When the Torah gives us the mitzvah, it says like all the nations. So you can argue that the people here are actually asking for a king the way it was formulated in Torah, like all the nations. What you said is correct. It's not the like all the nations. And the mitzvah over here says, Sima alay melech kechol hagoyim, right? Appoint a king over me like all the nations. But that's not what they asked. They asked, Tilanu melech leshoftenu. He says, give us a king to judge us. In the Torah's legal system, it's not the king's position to judge. The king is a political leader. He's not a judicial leader. He's not a judge. In all pagan and tyrannical societies, right, they have rex is lex, right is might. The king is the law. Under the Torah system, the Torah is the law. The only one that can judge is the Supreme Court and the judges it appoints. And they have to judge in according to God's law. So when they're asking for a king to judge us, God is saying they're rejecting me as the source of their law because they want to put it in a person. In a free society, everybody, including the king, is subject to the law. The Torah is our constitution, right? The king, if he breaks the law, he is subject to be judged by the Supreme Court. And this was the problem with what the people were asking. We have a mitzvah to appoint a king. And as you see here, not only do we have a mitzvah to appoint a king, right? The king needs to make a copy of the law and read it in all his spare time to make sure he's always following the law. And if he breaks the law, he has to be held accountable for it. The Torah's system is a free society where everyone is under the law, everyone gets freedom under the law, and the king's position is to serve the people by administering the people, by making sure to defend the people with his military. And by the way, if the king wants to engage war against another nation, and it's not a defensive war, and it's not a war to conquer our land, but let's say for he wants to gain extra land, there's some sort of natural resource in a country far away, and he wants to go and conquer it, he's in the, but only if the Supreme Court approves it. The king of Israel, his job is to serve the people, administer the people, defend the people, lead the people, and he can sit in court in judgment, but his voice would only be one out of 71, because there are 70 other members of the Supreme Court, if he's worthy of sitting in the court. Not every king was worthy of sitting in the court. King David was actually president of the Supreme Court, but as president of the Supreme Court, his voice is equal to all other members of the Supreme Court. So Re'eh comes to teach us that the greatest blessing that God can give us is a judicial system where everybody has equal access to, everybody can become an informed citizen, and this brings blessing to the society. And in Parashat Shofetim, we learn that even the king, right, says the only problem with appointing a king would be if he has judicial authorities above the court, above the Supreme Court. But if his authority is derived from the Torah, from our constitution, that is fine. So now what does it mean, Kechol HaGoyim? We saw Kechol HaGoyim isn't the problem. Right? When Shmuel rebukes the people, he doesn't mention the Kechol HaGoyim, like all the nations part. So what does that mean? I don't know if there's any clear answer. I can tell you my commentary to what that means. It says because there's no problem appointing a king like all the nations. The problem is only making the king the supreme authority. So Kechol HaGoyim, in my opinion, means the same way, the same political system that the goyim around you have. If you want to copy it, whether it be a monarchy or whether it be a democratic society with a Knesset instead of a king, right? Go ahead, no problem, do that, right? That is what the kingdom is. And if you want to have an elected king is just a title. You call him prime minister too. Says that's fine. Call him president of the country. Give him whatever title you want. Choose him whichever way you want. Right? If you see all the goyim around you doing it this way, you think it's a good way, go ahead and do it. The main point is that whoever it is you elect the head of your political leadership, he's not the source of judicial and legal authority. The Torah is. And he needs to follow that law just like any other citizen of the land. Now, says Vayazvuni, right? In God's rebuke, he says like everything that they did to serve other gods, right? Vayavdu Elohim acherim ken hema osim gamlach. Says that the people left to worship other gods, so they are doing to you, Shemuel, when they're asking you to replace your leadership with a king, right? What does this mean? Elohim acherim? It's normally regularly translated as other gods or some sort of pagan worship. But the word Elohim doesn't just mean God. The word Elohim means supreme legal authority. It says, and we have a halacha that says, En Elohim ela bedin shel Eretz Israel bilvad. It says the only court that is called an Elohim is the Supreme Court of Israel. And the Torah many times it says Ada Elohim yavod bar shenehem. It says when two people have a dispute, unto the Elohim, right, should their dispute come. What does that mean, unto the Elohim? It means to the court. It means they can go to a regional court, and if they can't settle the dispute, they can come all the way up to the Supreme Court of Israel. That is called an Elohim. And when King David he runs away from Shaul, and he kind of goes into an exile to edit the Philistines, right? He says, "Hen girshuni hayom milistapach benachalat Hashem." He says, "I was now away from from the portion of God, and more to say, Ech avod Elohim acherim. Go and worship a foreign god." What does that mean, to worship a foreign god? It means to worship a foreign legal system, or to be subject to a legal system that isn't God's legal system. Because now he's under the king of the Philistines, and he needs to follow his rules. The Torah, the halacha says, right? It says a person should always live in Eretz Israel, always live in the land of Israel. It says, why? Because if he's living in Husam Haaretz, right? If he's living abroad, it's as if he is worshiping a foreign god. Doesn't matter how religious you are, you keep Shabbat, you keep being subject to a foreign legal system is a form of worshiping a foreign god. Being subject to the Jewish legal system, to the Torah, that is the true worship of God. So a person should always prefer and aspire to be living in a Jewish society in Eretz Israel, especially once it'll be fully governed by the Torah's legal system. Now let's go back to the right? I want to show you how that paragraph ends. No, where are we? I think it was here. Re'eh. Says vehakilala, and the curse, that you should not hearken unto the commandments of your Lord, right? But turn aside from which he commanded you this day, right? Lalechet, to go after other gods. Lalechet achare Elohim acherim asher lo yeda'atem. Is to follow the instruction of a foreign god or a foreign legal system which you do not, or which isn't yours, which you do not know or do not recognize. And I'm sorry to say that in the modern state of Israel, we still have this Elohim acherim. When we declared our independence, right, instead of adopting our own legal system to be the constitution, we decided to continue and rely upon the British legal system. That is Elohim Ahirim. And the only way to change that is once we re-accept the Torah as a constitution and make the state of Israel governed by, at least in civil matters, right? Let's start with that. At least in civil matters, in civil disputes between two parties, to be governed by the Torah's laws and commandments. Which in this book over here, the Mishneh Torah, everyone has equal access to and can easily learn the Asur and the Mutar, right? And everyone can learn the laws, everyone can be an informed citizen. And this is what the vision of being a free society in Eretz Israel really is and should be. As we say in the Tikva, to be a free nation in our land, right? The only way to really achieve a free nation in our land is the only truly free person is someone who studies and knows the Torah, right? To make our constitution again and to govern our society according to not a man-made law, but a God-bestowed law, which is the ultimate beracha. Any questions or comments?
I have a go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say amen. That's all. Amen, Sami.
Okay. Amen, amen.
I don't, it's not a comment, but it's the first time, Sami, that I heard it so very clear, the explanation you gave and the translation from Hebrew to English, that they asked a king who judged them. That's the first time in my whole life I heard it so clear. It makes so much sense.
I've never heard it, but I've never heard it by anybody. So.
No, okay. It makes it so
it's the
clear.
only way, in my opinion, that those verses actually make sense.
Yeah. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense at all.
Right.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed your class.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Or is the next teacher already starting? I'm used to being last. So.
Yes,
Thank you, Sami.
Sami,
Yeah.
I would like to, if you have the time, if we have the time, maybe wrap it up and do like a bit of comparison with today's Israel situation.
We don't have time today. We don't have time.
Sorry.
Sorry, Esther. We don't have time today. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We can do it another time.
Thank you,
Sami is good in
Sami.
those things.
All right. Pleasure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Can I say one thing?